There was once a boy called Jack who lived with his mother. Times were hard and they were running out of resources. And one morning, Jack's mother said, "It's time we're going to have to sell our cow." And the cow was their only resource in their family. And they worked really hard, but she decided to make ends meet to tell Jack to go to the market and sell the cow because they needed the cash. So he went off, taking the cow to market, but on the way he met a little man. And this is the first time that Jack notices something strange, because the man who's coming towards him says, "Hello, Jack." And Jack has no idea how he knows his name. And he said, "What, you taking that cow to market? Look what I have." And he shows him in the palm of his hands 5 shiny beans. And Jack looked at them and said, "What are they? I've got to take the cow to market." And he said, "I'll give you these beans for your cow, and you won't ever have to go to market again, because these beans are magic beans and will be with you forever, giving you abundance and resource, all you'll ever need." And Jack looked at the beans and the man who had known his name, and he believed. And this is the first part in the story where we see the belief of Jack. You know, some people think of it as oh, he's a child, he's naive, like being offered sweets. But actually, Jack's quite a responsible boy. He's been working really hard. He comes from a family where everyone needs to take resources really, really seriously. And he's grown before his time. He's got jobs well before his time. And so he's not just a silly, impressionable boy. But something happens in this encounter with this man, and he believes. And he says yes. And in that yes, the whole story opens out and his fate completely changes, as does the fate of the whole world, as I'll show, hopefully. So Jack says, okay, and hands over the cow, the only resource their family has, and takes these 5 beans magically in his hand, and off he goes home, feeling like he's done the right thing, to meet his mother, who says, You haven't been very long. That was quick. How much did you get for the cow? £20, £30? What did you get? She said excitedly. Give me the cash. And then Jack opened his hands, and there were these 5 beans, which to him were sparkling and magical. Look what I've got, he says to his mother. I met this man who knew my name, who told me that these beans would mean that we would never have to go to market again, that they would bring us resource and abundance until time is ended, forever and ever. And he looked excitedly with joy at his beans, to then meet his mother's absolute disbelief and fury. What have you done? She said. You have given away everything that we ever had. Our cow was what kept us going. You gave away everything we had. How could you have done that? Get to your room. I never want to see or hear from you tonight again. You will not have supper. What have you done? And she was so upset and so angry and so shocked and so furious. She sent him up to his room. And Jack was just like, what have I done? And suddenly all his belief, all his faith and sense that this was the right thing to do drained out of him, and instead what filled that gap was shame. How could I have done such a thing? Shame and remorse and regret and loss. He fell into the deepest despair. He was frightened of his mother's anger. He was frightened at what he had done and how he had thrown his family into the worst situation of desperate poverty. And he fell asleep without any supper. And the mother had got these magic beans and said to him, these beans are just nothing. I just can't believe you sold our cow for this. And she throws them out of the window. Jack's in his room feeling desperate and finally falls asleep. And in the morning, he wakes up and remembers what he'd done, and he just feels terrible. And then he looks around him and everything seems a bit strange. The light's different. I think this is an important moment in the myth as well, in the fairy tale, that not only the first bit in the fairy tale where he sees the magic beans and he sees them through his eyes, which are as magic, and he feels them in his hands and experiences them as magic, to meet his mother, whose perspective is completely different. And after the shout out and the feelings of regret and remorse, and how he feels that he was completely wrong and did the wrong thing, he then wakes up and the lights change. Something's changed. We know it's the beanstalk outside that grew from the beans. But at first, there's just this thing about something's changed. He's woken up and there's a perspective shift, and he looks out of the window, and of course, it's the big, amazing, vigorous, huge green beanstalk. And he opens his window a little bit, just enough to climb out, and he looks up, and it goes so high into the sky he can't even see the top, and it's in the shape of a ladder. And he's like, I knew I was right. And before he even thinks about it, he gets up and starts climbing, ascending the ladder, which is the beanstalk, I mean. So the beanstalk is described in many of the retellings in the shape of a ladder. And so straight away, it's kind of the resonance or the association is to the biblical myth of Jacob's ladder. And anyway, even if we don't get that particular association, a ladder into the sky is kind of has so many deep associations to sort of ascension to a divine realm. And it's really interesting that this ladder, so-called, or this path to ascension in this fairy tale is comprised of a green beanstalk, an organic plant. I'll come back to that. So up he ascends, and he climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs until the beanstalk reaches higher, much higher than the trees, far up into the sky, and it's like he's in the heavens, and it's the ladder ends, and he kind of can get off the ladder, and there's like a path through the clouds into a meadow where there's a big house. And so really this is like, you know, in the imaginary, in all the associations, the ladder, like Jacob's ladder, up to God, up to the divine, up to the heavens. It's the only difference is that it's a plant, and so Jack is actually climbing up to heaven, like a stairway to heaven, but this is a strange heaven. It may not be the heaven that we might have imagined when we imagine somebody ascending up in that way. And he gets to this big house, and he knocks on the door, really hungry after his long ascent. And a big, huge, giant woman answers the door and sees this tiny boy. And he says, please let me in. I need to have some rest and something to eat. And she's like, quick, hide. My husband is a huge ogreous giant and his favorite meal is little boys. So straight away, the heaven is the realm, the castle in the sky, is not at all what we might have expected. It's not at all benign. It's not at all heavenly in the way that we might imagine. It's got a scary giant, a male giant who wants to eat little boys, and that's his favorite pastime. But the female giant, we might want to call them goddesses, just for the purpose of my argument. So the female goddess and the male god, perhaps, given it's in the realm of the sort of ascending heights in the sky, the female hides Jack and says, you better just, here's some food, and gives him a little snack. And then Jack can see outside of his hiding place the big ogre, scary giant who's like, I can smell a boy. And he's obsessed with eating boys, and he thinks he can smell Jack. And the female giant goddess, whatever, continues to hide him. And then Jack sees out of the corner of his cupboard that he's hidden, the giant counting his golden coins. And then he also sees this incredible magical object, which is a hen which lays golden eggs. And he watches the giant say, lay, and then the hen lays these golden eggs. And then he sees this beautiful, unusual object, like a hybrid object between a woman and a harp, which is kind of one object made of gold. And she plays herself this beautiful ethereal music. And he sees all of this. And you'll know from the story that it does the action in three, that he first of all steals a sack of gold when he sees the giant ogre counting out gold. And then he comes back again and Jack steals the golden egg laying hen. And then finally he comes and he steals the golden harp woman. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say something about those objects. So gold, you know, obviously gold is to do with abundance and wealth, but it's also linked, you know, to the sort of highest attainment in terms of, in alchemy, like the philosopher's sort of stone. It's like the highest, most beautiful, most valuable, most treasured, and also in it's linked to the sun in terms of its goldenness and its shine. So the abundance is up there in the heavens, but it's kind of coveted by this very sadistic sounding male ogre giant who just wants to keep it all for himself and eat little boys. And he's served by his goddess giant wife, who is there to sort of just, well, like be his servant basically. And also she shows kindness towards the little boy and doesn't want him to be eaten. Now, I just wanted to say something about these objects that he sees. So it's not just gold. So this story isn't just to do with Jack wanting money, wanting wealth, wanting material abundance. It starts off like that when the mother says, "Go and sell the cow, we really need money." But he decides that, you know, he takes the magic beans because he believes that these beans that you plant in the earth, that are magic, are going to give him abundance forever and he'll never need to go to market again. Similarly, up there in the so-called heavens, or not the heavens, the realms in the sky, whatever this place is, it isn't just gold that he sees. He sees these incredible miraculous objects, which are hybrid. They're half one thing and half the other thing. So a hen that lays golden eggs. A hen is an organic animal that belongs to the earth. It's a very earthly animal, but its capacity to lay golden eggs just makes it distinct from the generic hens we might see on a farm. And so it's linked to a kind of divine, it's half divine and half earthly. It has both in it, the chickenness of the organic animal hen and the golden egg, which belongs more to a divine realm. And similarly, the harp is a really beautiful image of a half divine and half sort of human known object, but it's also a complete association to an angel. If you think of angels, you know, as harp, playing the harp, that's the obvious association. And this is a golden woman and a harp melded together into one object. So really angelic and divine. So what I'm really interested in is the way in which the story goes, that Jack steals these things. And so it depends on which version you read, but readers over the centuries have had trouble with thinking about Jack as this kind of robber. That why is he climbing up this beanstalk and stealing everything? That how's stealing good? You know, they're trying to think of the sort of moral of it. But if we move this story outside of the material realm and think of it in a different way, my sense is that Jack is a little bit like Prometheus in Greek myth. Prometheus, you remember, is the god who was sitting around the table of the gods in heaven. And he decides to steal the fire from heaven, steal some fire in order to give it to the humans on the earth, in order to forward their civilization, you know, because everything that fire represents in terms of how civilization could progress in huge ways, obviously, that with this element fire, he was giving this huge gift to the progression of humanity and civilization. But the god Zeus was furious with Prometheus for doing this. And the myth goes that the Prometheus gets severely punished. But the desire of Prometheus, the bravery and the kind of philanthropic kind of desire to expand the consciousness and the civilization of humanity by giving them fire. It's like fire belongs to the heavens. It's also like in an associative way linked to gold and the sun, you know, these fiery elements that are bright and yellow and orange, that taking fire from heaven and giving it to the humans, it's like trying to bring down the heavens and to say no to this distinction between the divine and the human, and the heaven and the earth. So I actually feel that Jack could be seen as a kind of Prometheus type character, that first of all, he has this belief, this optimistic belief in abundance of these beings, in abundance of nature, the miraculousness of nature. These beings are called magic from the man that knows his name. And Jack recognizes them as magic because they are actually magic. Anything you, planting seeds and beans, or, you know, planting things and then you see them sprout up like is just does, it's magic. It's a miracle of a kind. And so when he sort of decides to commit to this notion that the beans are magic, and then climbs up the beanstalk, up to heaven, ascending to the gods. And what he sees there are these divine objects and a god and goddess, but who are cut off from the earth and who are not what we expect, in terms of the fact that they don't seem to like humanity. They want to eat boys and they want to keep the divine objects up to the heaven. But Jack, like Prometheus, says no, there shouldn't be this divide, and he intervenes on a cosmological level by taking the hen that lays the golden eggs and taking the angel down and the gold down the beanstalk, and down to earth, like Prometheus brings the fire. And it's like, when you think about the beanstalk itself, its roots are in the earth, taking all the miraculous nutrients from the earth and then shooting up and reaching up into the sky, so that the plant itself becomes a linking what connects the realms from the underworld through the earth and the world and the air up to the heavens. And so it's like the notion of a kind of tree of life, the beanstalk, like a sort of mystical tree that you see in lots of ancient biblical myths and texts. So the beanstalk is allowing him to ascend, but it's also, because it's a beanstalk, it's making us understand that ascension and descent, ascent and descent, are part of the same thing, that one isn't better than the other, that the roots go down into the earth where they get the magical nutrients that allow the beans to grow into the beanstalk, and the beanstalk stretches up into the sky towards the divine and touches the heavens. So the myth all in one seems to place the beanstalk, or the plant, as the connecting force between realms. And so it's quite pagan in some ways, that it worships the plant as that which connects realms of both earthly and divine. And then Jack, the Prometheus type figure, wants to break down the old cosmology of a division between the divine and the earthly by bringing down the angel harp, bringing down the hen that lays golden eggs. And the hen that lays golden eggs is really interesting, because once you bring it down onto the earth, just like the beans being magic, it's almost saying that when a hen lays an egg, gold or not gold, in real life, there's no real life, but in, you know, every egg that is laid is a golden egg, in that it's miraculous offering from nature, which is intrinsically linked to the divine. So the chicken, that hen that lays golden eggs, it's a beautiful image of trying to explain to us that the earthly and the divine are one. And this is for me, the whole point of Jack and the Beanstalk, is to talk about cosmology, not to talk about particularly social climbing and the material foundation that's been thought about before. But if you look at it through another lens, Jack in the Beanstalk is not a robber as such. He's someone like Prometheus. Yes, he steals the fire from heaven like Prometheus does, but it's like bringing down the riches from heaven. Now, when he steals the last object, because remember he goes back 3 times, firstly to get the sack of gold, secondly to get the hen that lays the golden eggs, and thirdly to get the harp woman, the angel, the golden angel. And each time the goddess giant wife helps him, basically. And then finally, when he does get the angel, the singing harp, she cries out, "Master, master!" And the angel, it's like the angel saying to God, "Look what's happening." And God runs after God, the giant. The giant runs after Jack, who's clutching the angel, and Jack rushes down the beanstalk, and at the end he shouts, "Mum, mum, get the axe, cut the beanstalk." And they get down with all the divine objects and the gold, and they cut the beanstalk down, and it falls down just as the giants got on it to come down, and so down crashes the giant and the beanstalk, and in some versions the wife, the goddess. And it depends which version you read, but it ends up that everything ends up down on earth. And the beanstalk and the god and the goddess and the hen that lays the golden eggs and the angel harp and the gold and Jack and his mum, everything is in one realm. So that in the end, the cosmology is changed into a all in one notion of the cosmos, rather than this harsh division between heaven, earth, and the underworld. And so perhaps Jack, as Prometheus, is a great champion of making people understand that heaven is here, in the beans, in the beanstalks, in the hens that lay eggs, in the music that we hear from the birds, that the angels and the heavenliness and the goddess, the wife, and the god are down here with us, with nature, with the beans, with the cows, with the chickens, with the birds. And so Jack and the Beanstalk becomes like a Prometheus tale, intervening into the cosmos and showing that nature and the plant connects realms, and that the magic is here with us now.